That is the E.T. Selvam winner of 2019 and our senior consultant, Vitreoretina Services, ex-consultant, sorry, Ekta Rishi, and she's now at Nebraska. So Ekta, thank you very much for joining us from Nebraska.
Thank you, Dr. Partha and the AIOS Scientific Committee. So without, I feel, wasting much time, I'll just start sharing my screen.
Ekta is in midst of her clinic and she has taken out time to join us from USA. And thanks a lot.
Right, so my poster was on drusen ooze in dry AMD. And this was a work which was done at Shankanetralaya, and I received the E.T. Selvam in 2019. So the study was basically on drusenoid PED, which are large pigment epithelial detachment with RPE thickening. And sometimes the dry AMD may manifest with a subretinal fluid in the absence of CNVM, and this was the main purpose of this study. So to report a unique entity of drusen ooze in patients with dry AMD along with subretinal fluid. And these were 4 eyes of 2 patients which had a long-term follow-up and a good documentation. So the first patient was a 61-year-old lady with a 6.6 and 6 vision in both eyes and multiple soft drusens in both eyes. Over the next 2 years, when she was followed, the vision dropped to 6.9 and 6, and the OCT showed subretinal fluid and drusenoid PED. So this is the color fundus, the autofluorescence, the ICG. So there were multiple soft drusens here, some confluent drusens as well. There was no leak on ICG, which was noted, and even on FFA, we were not able to find a definitive CNVM. The OCT showed a large drusenoid pigment epithelial detachment in both the eyes, and there was this high reflectivity seen in the subretinal space as well. So at that time, back in the early 2000s, well, any such presentation where we have a lot of hyperreflective material seen below the retina with some fluid, we always used to think about CNVM, an occult CNVM. But the ICG was not very definitive. But these patients did receive anti-VEGF injections in the next few years as they were followed up, as she was followed up. And the patient always maintained the vision. There was a reduction in the height. There was some collapse of the drusens, and the vision was always maintained. So this is the next 4-year progression. And you can see this dimension of the PED keeps changing. This high reflective material was going up in the retinal spaces. So it was progressing in the layer. Here we can see the flattening of the pigment epithelial detachment. There was some clearance of drusenoid material, but OCT angiography, when it came, it never revealed a vascular network, although it's difficult to segment the OCT here, OCT angiography here, but still we were not able to find any definitive vascular network at any level. So this is at the level of the choriocapillaries. So we had earlier only stopped giving anti-VEGF injections, and we are still observing this patient, and she's maintaining the vision. The patient too had a 10-year follow-up, another 63-year-old lady with a vision of 6.9 and 6, and again with a similar picture, who had also received anti-VEGF, but had no change in the subretinal fluid or vision. So this was the initial picture of the drusens, the autofluorescence picture. Again, ICG, no definitive leak, but again, the patient had received anti-VEGF earlier when we had some subretinal fluid which was coming. This was a 10-year progression. And you can see this subretinal fluid and this hyperdense material which was seen in the subretinal space. This is the pigment which is migrating further up into the retinal layers. The drusen shape kept changing over the years, and the pigments kept migrating up in the retinal layers. Again, on OCT angiography, there was no definitive vascular network which was seen on many occasions. So confluent drusens, they coalesce to form a large pigment epithelial detachment. There may be a hyperreflectivity which appears on the RPE before there is a breach in the RPE, and this drusen material which migrates in the subretinal space. So later on, the RPE pigments may migrate into the outer nuclear layers, and they remain as hyperreflective spots with some backscattering. This drusen material is phagocytized by RPE cells and it clears. So there is basically an RPE atrophy which further progresses along with the age of the drusen. And in between, the drusen collapse is also seen as the material clears up. So this is more of a geographic atrophy, and we have not been able to document any vascular network, and that's the reason the vision was maintained, because this was slightly extrafoveal area where the atrophy was happening, so vision was well maintained. So the study demonstrates for the first time that the drusen ooze occurs in the subretinal space, and there can be subretinal fluid along with it. So there can be pigment disruption. This drusenoid material absorbs over time, leading to the continuity of the RPE. The drusen ooze may be a precursor of geographic atrophy. It may further lead to neovascularization as well. Anti-VEGF has no role in this, and OCTA is of immense importance in these cases to understand the pathophysiology. So coming over to my journey, I feel Dr. Chirakshi covered it pretty well, that we need to have an allotted time for our academics and research. Otherwise, we will never have time to look back on our cases and to identify some patterns. So we even need a very good documentation of our cases so that later on we can revisit them. So until and unless we have an allotted time, we will never be able to go through all the investigations in detail. Like in this patient, if you're reviewing the patient for the past 10 years, it takes a lot of time. So we need to archive the pool of interesting cases, and there can be more patterns to pathophysiology. Why do we consider a poster presentation? Again, this question was well answered by Chirakshi. When you have interesting images to present which can just explain the pathophysiology and which can attract the attention, I feel it's better to go ahead with a poster presentation. Well, sometimes the poster presentation is looked down upon by the people, that this is a lower form of a scientific presentation. You may take critical opinions, have mentors. They will give you good guidance about such patterns, but believe in yourself and be prepared to present a scientific information, because science is more than just awards. Just go on with the journey. Thank you so much, Dr. Pathan.
Thank you very much, Ekta. And now we'll have discussions from Dr. Mahesh Shanmugam and Dr. Krishna Prasad Kullu.
Thank you, sir. Since I am a phaco-refractive person, like always, I am more interested in seeing the retina cases. But I think when Mahesh sir is around, I think he is the right man to have a discussion. I'll just have a look at this.
KP, you have been in the scientific committee more than any of us. Okay, so you have the right to say where was the winning point in this fantastic paper, in this fantastic poster. But over to you, Mahesh.
Thanks, Partha. Congratulations, Ekta, and for a wonderful poster as well. See, the points which I make out of this is, like, she's brought out a very important clinical point, which is useful in the sense, like, when we see fluid, we treat. So that's not what it is what Ekta has mentioned. But the journey is what is more important. The important point is that she has retained the question. As she said, like she saw the first patient in 2000, but then the poster presentation was in 2019. So that question which was irking her, she continued to retain that question and sought the answers. The first paper or first presentation on the do's and woos was in 2017. I would like to ask Dr. Ekta, were you drawn to that do's and woos? The attention was drawn to your patient after that presentation, after that paper?
Yes, yes. It was an interesting paper, and definitely I understood the pathophysiology better with that paper. So I realized why these patients are not losing their vision over time.
Yeah, that's another thing which Dr. Chirakshi mentioned, the question of being up to date with literature. So when we just read an abstract and then we come across something, then the trigger should come up. So this is a case which I have seen. So maybe this is what it is. And going back and pulling out all the cases and then looking at this is what Dr. Ekta has done, and that has resulted in a beautiful paper, beautiful presentation. So that lets us learn. So is there anything else we can add up to what is already published? So this is what both the presenters have brought up. That is that being up to date with literature. And it's extremely easy to being up to date with literature. So you have the latest abstracts delivered in your mailbox if you use something like a Medfetch or something like that. All it needs is to just read up and then look at it and then compare it what we do in clinical practice. It's not essential that like we should be perfectly academicians, and with the existing clinical practice, it's very, very easy to be up to date as well as being clinical, as well as do research as well. Another thing is, like, as time goes on, she has used the different investigative modalities available. So earlier she has used ICG and FFA, and subsequently when the OCT and Octa were available, she has used that as well. So what is available in your clinic, using them and then looking at it more critically, comes up with newer findings and newer papers. And OCT and OCT are full of acronyms. So there can be one which is named after you subsequently. So all you need to do is just keep looking at the images. Though it can be boring, just keep looking at them, something will pop up, and there's a very good chance of it being accepted as for the next ET Silvam, or for that matter as a paper in any other prestigious journal. So that would be what I would want to take out from Dr. Ekta's presentation. Dr. Krishna Prasad.
Thank you, sir.
Same here, sir. It was a fantastic idea that how she has gone into all the investigation mode. I think whatever you said, I think I do agree that it's a fantastic presentation, Ekta.
Thank you. The interesting part was like,
you have to unmute.
Two of my judges asked me at that time why this is a poster and why this is not a paper. So I had not presented it. I had not given it for a paper because I only wanted it to be a poster because we wanted to display these images.
Fantastic. Very nice, Ekta. A quick comment from any of the other faculty?
No, just like I didn't see the poster, so I think all the presenters should show the poster, because I think what the first speaker told, the formatting of that poster is also very critical. So it's not just the material, but the presentation is also important, the colors, the sizes, where you put the image, where you put the reference. So I think all those things are also important, and maybe, when you're discussing, I will bring that up in other discussion also. But I think if every presenter had put the poster also, that gives you an idea. So maybe I missed, maybe you had put the poster, but maybe I missed it.
Thank you, ma'am. I think this is a very pertinent point, because even when in the international conferences, like in the academy, the poster is a huge size in a horizontal display. And it's a very, very valuable tool. And I remember Dr. Samar Basak, guiding me to how to make a poster when I went for a poster presentation in ESCRS. So maybe we'll have Dr. Samar Basak speak on this in one of the later presentations.